Frontier Theater, a theater from a positive future. One dedicated to gifting timely, transformative information via wizened guests and luminaries for the purpose of freeing our culture and planet from a negative, disastrous timeline. Join us as we explore the solutions. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Robert Davis, and I'm truly blessed today. Chameli Ardagh is a keeper of the sacred, in my opinion, and a catalyst for an awakening that is so truly needed here in the sense of the feminine spirit. We've been on a kind of a yin shortage here for some time, and it's truly time for this awakening that is really the element of all of us, male and female, in the ability to receive and hear and honor. And I think that's always something that's good. Chameli is a yogini and a woman's wisdom keeper. For more than 28 years, she's been immersed in the spiritual studies and practices, and it's together with the Global Awakening Women Community catalyzed maps of spiritual awakening that are accessible, practical, and honoring of women today. Rooted in earth-honoring, devotional women's spirituality and goddess-centered tantric yoga, she's especially appreciated for her love of mythology and storytelling as a key to spiritual awakening and embodiment. As the visionary and founder of Awakening Women, she works together with an administrative team of 9 women exploring a business model based on ease, freedom, and honoring of the cyclic nature of creativity. She's passionate about making spirituality the source of our practical living, combining that with social activism, which is an important point for me on these topics, and is committed to using her influence and resources to educate and support organizations working on behalf of Mother Earth and the empowerment of women and girls. Following her own love of prolonged periods of practice immersion, she retreats in India and gathering with women from all over the world, as well as online practice immersions. She's the initiator of a global sisterhood network and the author of 2 books on feminine empowerment and spirituality, which have been published in 3 languages. As a teen, Chameli embarked on her journey as a spiritual explorer, which in 1991, at the age of 20, led her to India, where she has undergone most of her thousands of hours of intense practice of meditation and spiritual studies. She has also been through extensive training in group facilitation and spiritual counseling. Since 2001, she has been a student of Shanti Maya, a wisdom teacher based in India and France. Chameli was born in Norway, and when she's not traveling, she now lives in Northern California with her husband Arjuna and their cats Leonard and Luzma. Well, Chameli, welcome, and I'll let you explain the Yogini Village and a few other things as we go along, but I just want to acknowledge, right before we jump into this, some women that have been influential to my life, and you are part of that tribe. The lineage of Barbara Marx Hubbard, Brooke Medicine Eagle, Jean Shinoda Boland, Rowena Petit, Kreider, Shakti Gwain, Susanna Kennedy, the young Polona Samrak, Gangaji, Joan Halifax, Clarissa Pincola Estes, Rianne Eisler, Joanne Macy, Nicola Christie, and on and on and on. There doesn't seem to be a shortage in messaging. What is missing from the embodiment and actualization of that messaging? if missing is even the right term. It's just
Yeah, I think it is an unfolding. I think it is all happening. It's just quite recent, this new wave of what I call the return of the goddess, that it is the feminine is returning into our spiritual awareness, into our spiritual practice, into illuminate where we have created splits, even in the name of non-dual teachings, that we can slip into this habitual way of fragmenting reality, fragmenting the mundane, the sacred, spirit matter. In my experience, the return of the goddess is a return of wholeness, a light that will challenge any place we create the vision. And it is coming right in this time where we are, facing the consequences of our addictions, our greed, our collective lifestyle that is not sustainable. And so it happens right at this time where more and more women, millions of women, we have hundreds of thousands of women just in our community. And you mentioned all of these leaders. So we are speaking about millions of women just hearing that call from deep below to take on the assignment to birth this consciousness through the body, through woman. Not so that, that woman is better than men. In my experience,
sure.
The deeper I go into these practices, men, women, feminine, masculine, doesn't really actually apply anymore.
Yeah.
It is just that we have been so imbalanced in the disembodied, abstract, more male-influenced spirituality. So here we are just looking at the potential of a wholeness, of a balance coming back. I don't know what's in the way. I think it is challenging. It is a descent that is required of us, a descent, a risking to let go of a lot of those lofty ideals that, feels momentarily kind of like a relief or an escape, the blissful peace of spaciousness. But it doesn't last. Yeah, anything that is fragmented in that way is just intrinsically not aligned with how existence is, which is wholeness. So it is a descent, a risking, and coming down. And a lot of us has to face a lot of more uncomfortable feelings and things that we have avoided, that we have to face in our body, like the shadow work and all of this that can feel as if we are, oh my God, I'm just entangled into the jungle again. Let me escape, make me just rest in the peacefulness of the spaciousness. But the beauty is that if we dare to go through all of those layers, is that we reach the same spaciousness, which is within all things, which is within matter. And we begin to realize freedom that is not conditioned on a certain state or certain feeling, certain circumstances. It is a freedom that is, our essence, which is not anything less in a feeling or in a body than it is in the silence of meditation. It's the same. It just takes different forms.
Yes. So then all of that, it almost bespeaks a lifestyle of embodiment. Mm-hmm. So introducing our culture from a without, and then hopefully positively provoking from a within to address the levels of understanding needed to shift and allow our planet to survive in the very, very near future. It is a goddessian effort, let's say, is needed with extreme deep magic. This is a deep magic period. I don't see anything else working but deep magic. And so how is that being facilitated, do you think, at this point in time? The subtleties are there with all the information. It's the uptake that I'm always wondering about, that how can the message be crafted in such a way to allow the red states in North America to understand and embrace all the needed changes which have to occur in a short period of time in order for our survival, in order for us to exist as a species. So if you woke up in the morning and walked outside and everything had changed into your sense of the dreamscape of where we would want to be, what would that day look like? What would an interaction be in Nevada City when you walk downtown? And it was a compounded question, believe me.
Yes, exactly. The direction that I feel that, well, that kind of my evolutionary momentum is going is to reawaken the kind of inherent knowledge of how to live in harmony with the greater whole, which is inherent wisdom of nature. Nature knows how to do that, and I am nature. So it is to fine-tune my awareness and consciousness with the physical expression of that consciousness, which is the body, and also just earth underneath my body, and the air and the trees, and it's just it is a sense of consciousness weaving itself into a greater story, into a greater picture, which opens for resources that is not available to us when we are locked into an identification of being a small me separate from everything else. So I have great hope, and I mean, all around me I see perfect perfect living. Yeah, it's right in our face everywhere we look. So this is why I'm so passionate about the awakening of consciousness, because I see it as a social justice component. I see it as political even, that in order for us to rest into the resources that we are, there is a shift of consciousness needing to happen. And when you mention the red states, or people asleep, or people kind of locked into this disembodied, fearful place, I feel that we have a lot of work. Just, I know for myself, I've been doing spiritual practice for, almost 30 years. And and I'm baffled by the layers of blind spots that I meet in my own practice. So, and it humbles me. And I see, that this is thick. This is a thick, dense layer that we all are affected by. And we can, do not only inner work. I don't think you can separate inner work or activism anymore. It's kind of, it goes together. But definitely without the awareness or the awakening, our actions will somehow arise out of and perpetrate the same trance or the same machinery. Sometimes even saving the earth or the climate arguments can even feed into more panic, more disembodiment, more grasping, which is the very disease.
Yes. So the tools, I read a little bit about you're developing spiritual practice tools. What kind of tools do you think that you've worked with would be applicable in more of an in mass context, or as far as a facilitational element to this recognition that you're speaking of, which I believe is innate and instinctual for an awakening within all people, that it's really close to the surface. And so presenting opportunities for people to open up and experience that, are there tools that you can think of that would be helpful?
Yes, I'm sure, like you are, so deep in that inquiry. And it has shifted just the last years, just me and my team and my community, we are really exploring. First of all, we are noticing the enormous pull and activation of the nervous system that we are in all the time. You know, all the information we receive, the
Yeah.
body knows the threat to, you know, to our existence.
Yeah.
So it is kind of in a fight and flight. So we are really exploring, like, what are needed for the decades to come? What are the practices and tools we need to have just to take care of that? Because when you have, you know, you have fight and flight, you have a you actually drunk, yeah, you have a cocktail of chemicals in your body that affects your thoughts, affects your resilience. So so we are coming back to very basic things, like, you know, the conscious breath, you know, the connecting with earth. I have noticed myself when I have gone just the last periods of time, just go through so much dismantling and this dissolution within my being, and I see how rituals are like, it has a new meaning for me now, because they become like a basket that holds me when, you know, when everything is just kind of chaotic or you know, is dissolving, like a mush. Sometimes my consciousness feels like a mush, and then but the rituals keeps me like a basket. So small things. I say a prayer for the land I live on every day, connecting with the land. You know, I have my little god, my Lakshmi, you know, just connecting to the intrinsic abundance of this life as an antidote to this kind of, you know, fear of the lack. Breathing, you know, kindness to the body. I also see that how fight and flight create kind of very harsh mental loops, internal mental loops, because not only have we these symptoms, but we also have kind of judgments of these symptoms. So, you know, my teacher used to say, like, you know, be kind to yourself. And I was so ambitious seeker, and I was always like, yeah. But, you know, let's break through. Let's, you know, get, you know, the real thing.
Time is short.
Yeah. But more and more I get what she was saying, because like, kind to yourself is not a feeling, it's a skill that you cultivate, you cultivate that muscle. So when the shit hits the fan, it's there, like a basket holding you. You have that muscle.
The shit hit the fan muscle. I think it's important. There's a whole book there. I think, you know, on right now. People need that. There's such a thirst for those that are seeking or moderately seeking, or at least feeling the repercussions of the whole biosphere, noospheric energetics. You know, so having skills, being able to develop skills, you know, from things that I've seen move along, the bifocal vision of Nicola Christie and how she tries to balance things. And then, you know, moving forward, you know, at the Light Institute with Chris Griscom, and looking at the history of forgiveness. We have a culture that has not found forgiveness for itself. You know, we have a herstory thing going here, and we've and the birth process as a culture, we've never really understood what it means to be all the pain that every human being has probably experienced coming through the birth, and not acknowledging that and the deepness of these things. So, and then your development of the different tool systems, these are important pieces that I want Frontier Theater to basically, hopefully, offer to anyone, everyone, because it's about learning these skill sets right now that are vital,
Yeah, vital. And yeah, it's to commit to it, to really see it as vital.
Do you have a short anything on the compilation of those particular skills that you offer people to?
We have just started actually to collect this. We have something called the Self-Care Collective that we just started just a few weeks ago. where we send out self-care practices like this. It's one coming out, like every second week, and then from different resources, teachers in our community. And this is just, again, a response to these questions that you are sitting, offering to us here. It's just like, how can we meet these decades that we are facing, grounded, rooted in resilience, because now is the time we have been preparing for. It's all hands on deck, and we are here for the long run. This is not a time where we actually are going to get the great release of solutions. What is required of us is to stay. How can we engage with something that doesn't have a solution right now? How can we stay engaged and awake and notice, all the tendency to numb or to go into shame and then get overwhelmed, and then it's all of this. It's challenging to be with a crisis that doesn't have a solution, and so it takes diligence to stay. If not, we're going to just check out.
It's learning to understand the sacrosanctedness of life, to actually understand what life is, what a grace, what a miracle, to get down to the absolute base of this phenomenology that we're all gifted with. And it's, if somehow, some way that reverence could be imparted, from there all things are possible. That's why I always look at this as a star culture really reawakening. We are a star culture, and that's.
And reverence, sometimes because that is something that I would bring to any question like that. What keeps you going? Where do you find your motivation? Where do you find your courage? Where do you find your clarity? And it always, for me, comes back to devotion or to reverence. And then many kind of, the eyes glaze over a little bit, because it's like we think that is something that we sometimes feel or sometimes not, or sometimes we do in church or in practice.
Sure.
But if we actually, like you say, it's more to cleanse our eyes and see what is. There's nothing we make up. It's just to begin to see what we are part of. And there's an inner prostration there. And then to center our life from there. For me, that's a very practical, because that's what's just every day just feeds me and moves me. And kind of soften. It kind of I get out of my own way so something bigger can come through.
So, everything you're saying is just very, very resonant and heartfelt for me, and I believe for many. And I'm going to just, again, kind of hope for a haiku version of a book. It's very
it's good you keep saying that. I'm taking it in.
Very simple, because its simplicity is great. And you can, do the truncation of dissertation into haiku form for people to understand it, because there are these bullet points. There are these bullet points, and it doesn't have to be overly elaborated on, but to have the framework to work with in a succinct fashion. I probably won't bring it up again, but
please do.
to mention it, because it's needed, and you have such a great voice for it and grasp of it, and because of that. So as far as in moving into solutions and talking about tools and kind of the maps. Maps is another thing I'm fascinated with as far as how we get there. And I think we've kind of covered it. You've kind of gone over how do we get from where we are individually, which then becomes a collective process. It doesn't happen any other way. So we're dealing with all these individuated units. So how do each of these become or bloom for the bouquet of the experience of the many? So maps to get there is, that's where the layers of the linear mind, let's say, become befuddled at times because of looking at economic systems, to look at biological systems on the planet, and all the different layers that are going on. And you know, when I discussed the magic before, because to try to understand it again and figure it out in a literal way, I just come to the point that I'm praying for a deep magic. As a bomb, there'll be some wafting that becomes the 100th monkey plus phenomenology that creates the dynamic in which you see people on the street, and I do see them. I know you see them more perhaps per capita in Nevada City than I do, but those that are willing to take the chance of connection and honoring and seeing the namaste in another person. And just to be on the street with that, I was up in Nelson, British Columbia several times and experienced that town in a way that 3 days I was walking on the streets and the people were hugging each other after 3 days. We had seen each other 3 days in a row. And I said, golly, that's just something that, it's possible. It's possible like that. So anyway.
Yeah. I like to draw upon the mythology. In mythology, I find a lot of maps. And the beauty of mythology is that it's multidimensional. So we can relate to it as a story. But as we work with what we call embodied mythologies, it is as if the different pieces of the story, not only the content, but the pattern of how the story goes, relates to our own consciousness. So it weaves us into a more multidimensional way of moving in the world, where we see that the inner awakening of consciousness is reflected in how we relate to each other and how we create our society. And there's one myth from the root of our civilization, which is the Greek mythology, where we see the very beginning of this disembodiment, or this split, where Mother Gaia, she's just floating in an empty universe, and Father Sky, Uranus, he is wrapped around her. So in this time, earth and heaven are one. So they are just making love. They're just completely merged, one. There's no separation. And out of their lovemaking is this incredible union between heaven and earth. All the creatures in the world are created. And they keep just kind of birthing all of these creatures. And then Uranus Father Sky, he discovers that not all of their children are pretty children. It's all the trees and animals and humans, but there's also monsters and goblins and gremlins and dwarfs and giants. And when Uranus sees those, when he sees the monsters, he gets ashamed. He has this idea of what his children should be. So what he does is that he begins to hide the monster down into the basement, into the underworld. And then he kind of pretend that they're not there. So he can kind of continue his idolized, reality. So he keeps doing this for a while until Gaia discovers what he's doing. And she gets just like full of rage. She just trembles and thunders. Because she says, how can you do this? These are my children. Pretty children, ugly children, they're all part of me. And then she calls upon one of her sons and says, you have to stop this, you have to stop your father. And Kronos, the son, his name, Kronos means time. He comes with his dagger and he cuts off the genitals of Uranus And Uranus, in great pain and fear of the rage of the mother, he escapes far, far up into the heavens, where he has been ever since. And this was the split between heaven and earth. And, you know, it's no secret that humanity, we went with him. Our identification went up with him in our Western civilization. We built it on the principles of this kind of above earth, away from the wrath of the mother, away from the monsters, you know, this bright light, spacious, idolized part. And our spirituality, of course, also did that was the goal of the spirituality. And then we created this split. And then, of course, now what we are seeing within both, you know, all genders, is not only women feeling this kind of call of the descent, because this split, it didn't really happen. It just happened in human consciousness. And then we begin to kind of align ourselves with that union again, which includes bringing the exiled monsters out of the basement, because they have just been running around creating havoc, you know, like without parental supervision. They don't go away, they just have their own life. And we see reflection of our own shadow all around us, the way we create, and the reflection of this split, and the reflection of this, if we are identified with this kind of abstract sense of self, where we begin to see everything else as object, we begin to see our own body as an object. We begin to filter all our experience through kind of the ideals of who we take ourselves to be. We just, even no matter how successful or enlightened and bright and light we manage to create that identity, it's intrinsically a source of suffering because it is fragmented. It can be a paradox because that descent can kind of bring up shadow stuff, and you feel that, oh my God, I'm losing my connection with the spaciousness. But again, if you risk it, you will then, come into a spaciousness that is, just like the scientists, they have discovered now, if you penetrate deep enough into matter, you find space, you find energy. Uranus is inside Gaia. You don't have to move away from Earth to find that spaciousness and freedom. That is found in the union.
Inclusion and inclusiveness, and omniversing. Omniversing. So if there's anything you would like to close with, again, we covered some amazing topics, and this will be the first element of you writing your new book. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you from my heart to keep pushing that one. It's very inspiring.
Because it's got to be easy, and it's got to be simple. So when that space finds you, and fun, that's the tenets of motivational action, I guess. So I know you've got a lot of things moving. We're going to have on the website all of your future events that are going to be posted. If there's anything you would like to discuss about that, or the village, which I thought was so wonderful in concept, to have a lot of my early work with the spiritual emergence networks and working with the Stanislav Grof material and transpersonal psychology, and where do people go when they become crazy and go through a transformation, and physical, psychophysical, it's so many different levels of that process, and that you were providing a nest for people and it's a time for a big nest. It's a huge nest need. There. So if any of those things you want to talk about, or just close with a song and dance?
Exactly. Let's go with a song and dance. We are in the birthing process of this village, our Yogini village. And it's just along the lines of what we have been speaking of. How do we stay rooted in resilience in the next decades? How can we meet it awake so we can be an instrument of the evolution that wants to happen, instead of, keep just repeating into the loops of fear and greed and lack.
Yes.
And it is also, I'm excited to just explore also just how spirituality and the very ordinary life can be woven even more together. I myself have been, I travel to we have our ashrams in India and Greece, and I do all this intense practice. But most of the women in my community are with the kids, are with the, are maybe getting older and wants to just be with a cup of tea, or are with the animals and garden. And we still carry this belief that, oh, spirituality is somewhere else. Spirituality is in the temples, or spirituality is what I'm going to do when the kids grow up. Or,
Right.
and so we are excited about just explore, like just to pop all of those. Again, just ideals that are borrowed and that create separation.
Yes.
And we can't afford that anymore, to split our spirituality away from our lives. So that's what we are exploring in our yogini village. Yeah.
So again, the events that you're also going to be doing, you just kind of briefly went over again. So we'll make sure we have those on the site. And
Yes.
Again, it's an honor, and I'm just part of the great joy for me on doing these interviews simply is to have an opportunity to talk with such heartful, conscious people, and so well intended, and it's just I don't live close to people, too often, and so there's distances, but so many people I feel I would be blessed to consider family, and to know that you're out there. To know you're out there, it gives me great hope. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful, because we will need each other. We will need community. And I feel that actually that weaving, like you are doing, weaving is the antidote to also that disease of isolation and over individualization. That even has infiltrated our spirituality, as if spirituality is kind of a race and somebody's gonna reach the goal, and I'm out of here, I'm the one who got it, and I don't think the more I awaken, the more I awaken to a self bigger than this small me. You see that we are in the same soup. Your awakening is my awakening is your awakening. We are in this together. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful just the way that you keep stitching us, these threads, together again into a basket that will hold us.
Well, a copious basket it shall be.
Yes.
So everyone, I thank you for joining us today, and I'm again so thankful. As I've mentioned, I will mention again, I'm grateful for the presence today of my guest, Chameli, and look forward to being in touch with everyone. And again, continued great work, Chameli, and I look forward to our next encounter. And thanks for, second time we've talked. We talked about 8 or 9 years ago when we were indeed younger. I think we were younger.
Maybe.
In some ways.
Yeah, exactly. In some way, I feel that I'm getting more and more. Yeah, I know less and less. I'm sure I was much more confident with everything at that time. Yeah.
Well, cheers and love.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been an honor.
Bye-bye.